Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world of cobblestone courtyards, flickering torches, and the kind of romance that starts with nothing more than a look across a dimly lit hall. Imagine yourself there. The air is thick with wood smoke, and the faint tang of damp stone. Somewhere, a lute plucks a slow tune, and in the shadows, two people's eyes meet in a silent spark. There's no instant swipe right, no texting at midnight, just a locked gaze and the promise of something dangerous. You might think you'd survive here, but trust me, with all the rules, watchful eyes, and the odd risk of public humiliation, you probably wouldn't last through dessert. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world we're drifting off together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The courtyard you're in smells faintly of beeswax from the torches, their light shimmering against wet flagstones. Above, stars scatter themselves between the crenellations of the castle walls, but your eyes aren't on the sky. They're on the small group moving along the far end of the square. One figure lingers, just a fraction longer than the others, their head tilting your way. That's how medieval flirting begins. Not with bold declarations, but with a stolen glance, so fleeting it could be denied later if someone asked. In this era, everything about attraction is slowed down, stretched out. That stolen glance might be the only move for weeks. If you're of noble birth, it's even trickier. Love is a game you play while wearing a suit of armor made of etiquette. You don't just walk up to someone and declare yourself. Instead, you catch their eye during the evening's walk in the courtyard, maybe again at morning prayers. Historians still argue whether these rituals were more about genuine attraction or just a careful dance to test social boundaries. Here, the courtyard itself becomes part of the performance. Benches are placed just so, half in shadow, half in moonlight, perfect for lingering without technically stopping. A couple might cross paths near the herb garden, pretending to admire the rosemary while actually stealing a longer look at one another. In a way, it's more thrilling than the kiss itself. Every heartbeat stretched out, every gesture loaded with meaning. A mainstream fact? Courtyards were the heart of castle social life, especially in the evenings. It's where visiting nobles mixed, news was exchanged, and marriages were quietly negotiated under the cover of casual walks. And yet, there's a quirky tidbit most people miss. In some places, courtyards were deliberately designed with echoing corners, so that someone at one end could pick up whispers from far away. Perfect for gossip, or for catching the wrong snippet of conversation at exactly the wrong moment. You find yourself leaning against a column, the cool stone pressing into your shoulder. Across the way, the same pair from earlier passes again, closer this time. The man's hand brushes the folds of his tunic, nervous. The woman adjusts her veil, fingers trembling just enough for you to notice. In the world you're standing in, these micro gestures are louder than shouting. Every step echoes, reminding you that someone might be listening from a darkened window. It's part of why glances become the language of love here. There's plausible deniability in a look. You can't accuse someone of treason for admiring a tapestry a little too intently while you're standing nearby. Or can you? Remember, this is a time when a misinterpreted look could cause scandal, especially if one of the parties was already promised to another. You trail behind the couple far enough not to be noticed, but close enough to see the light catch on the gold threads of her gown. That gown isn't just clothing, it's a billboard for her family's wealth and influence. He knows it too. His glances keep returning, drawn like a moth to candlelight. It's here, in the dance between propriety and desire, that medieval courtship breathes. Some historians believe the scarcity of physical contact actually amplified attraction. When you're forbidden to touch, the mind turns a glance into a feast. You can spend days replaying that moment, wondering if the twitch of a smile was real or imagined. And if you're thinking this sounds exhausting, it is, but it's also intoxicating in its own way. The bells ring from the chapel tower, breaking the spell. You watch the couple drift apart. She joins a group of ladies heading toward the inner hall. He lingers a moment longer, as if willing her to look back. She doesn't. Or maybe she does, and you're the only one who sees it. You wander deeper into the courtyard, where the scent of crushed time rises underfoot. Somewhere in the shadows, a cat slinks past, tail curling like a question mark. The torches sputter in the cool night air, and you can't help but feel that you've stepped into the opening act of a very slow, very high-stakes play. Tonight, the story has only just begun, but already you're learning that in the medieval world, a kiss doesn't just happen. It's a destination reached by countless small steps, each one more deliberate than the last. And here, under the watchful eyes of stone towers and the unblinking stars, the first of those steps has just been taken. You drift from the courtyard into the warmth of the great hall, where the air hums with chatter and the clink of goblets. The walls are hung with heavy tapestries, scenes of hunts, saints, and improbable-looking lions. And beneath them, the glow of the fire paints everything in amber light. Here, where nobles gather for feasts, the game of glances changes. It becomes subtler, wrapped in layers of etiquette as intricate as the embroidery on their sleeves. You find a seat along the periphery, the place where servants, musicians, and the curious like you can observe without being too obvious. At the high table, ladies sit in careful rows, their veils pooling like waterfalls of silk. The men across from them lean forward to speak, but the words are low, too soft for you to catch. Still, the eyes give them away. A lady turns her head slightly as though examining a goblet, but her mouth moves just a few quiet syllables toward the man at her side. It's a whisper hidden behind the veil, a skill refined for moments exactly like this. In the medieval world, even speaking to someone you fancy can be dangerous if done too openly. That's why the veil becomes both shield and tool. It blurs lip movements, lets secrets travel unnoticed in the noise of the hall. Historians still argue whether these whispered exchanges were mostly flirtation or business in disguise. After all, marriages among the nobility were more about alliance than passion, and a few well-placed words could shift fortunes. But it's tempting to imagine a laugh hidden under that veil, the thrill of saying something no one else can hear, the mainstream fact. In medieval etiquette, direct speech between unmarried men and women of status was often mediated, either through a chaperone or during structured events. You didn't just stroll over to chat. A conversation like this, shielded by fabric and background noise, was a loophole in the system. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some women actually scented their veils with crushed herbs like lavender or rosemary, not for hygiene alone, but so that if someone leaned in close enough to speak, they'd catch a pleasant fragrance. Think of it as the medieval version of spritzing perfume before a date. From your vantage point, you catch another exchange. A knight in a deep blue surcoat leans toward a woman in crimson, his lips moving just enough to make her eyes widen. She covers her mouth as if to cough, but the corners of her eyes crinkle in a smile. It's a chess game of manners. No overt laughter, no dramatic gestures, just micro-reactions hidden under layers of fabric and formality. The food arrives, platters of roasted game, trenchers piled with bread, and jugs of spiced wine. It's a convenient moment for private words. The serving and shifting of plates gives cover for brief, low murmurs. You notice how conversations ripple in waves, some louder, some dropping to near silence when the topic turns delicate. A servant carrying a dish of pomegranates passes close to you and the scent bursts into the air. You watch as one of the ladies at the high table plucks a seed, her fingers lingering on the edge of the bowl. The knight beside her notices and his gaze flickers, brief but telling. In medieval courtly language, even the way you handled food could carry a hint. A slow bite of something rare and sweet could be a statement all its own. Remember the couple from the courtyard? You spot them now, seated far apart, but their eyes keep meeting across the hall. It's maddening to watch, so much longing, so little actual movement. You wonder if they'll risk a whispered word tonight, or if this is one of those evenings where the most they get is the knowledge that the other is still looking. The musicians strike up a softer tune, a lull in the evening's energy. Voices drop, and in that relative quiet, you catch a fragment. Just a name, nothing more, but it's enough to make the woman who hears it lower her gaze quickly. You can't tell if she's shy or calculating, but in this room, both expressions look almost the same. Your attention shifts to a pair near the far wall. They lean slightly toward one another and heads tilted just enough to be conspiring, their words disappearing into the folds of their clothing. It's the art of saying much while appearing to say nothing. A performance so practiced that outsiders can never quite tell if they've witnessed romance or politics. And here's the thing. In this world, the two are often intertwined. A whispered promise might be genuine affection, or a calculated offer for land, titles, or influence. That uncertainty is part of the thrill and the risk. A servant drops a goblet somewhere near the middle tables, and the crash jolts the moment apart. Laughter rises, the hall's volume surges, and the whisperers settle back into their seats, faces arranged into bland, polite masks. You lean back too, feeling the warmth of the fire on your cheek, and realize you're already caught in their rhythm. Moments of tension, release, and silence, all woven into the fabric of an evening. It's strange, isn't it? How the heart can race over nothing more than a murmur behind silk. But here, in this hall, that's how connections begin. Not with a kiss, not yet, but with the smallest flicker of breath between two people who know they shouldn't be speaking at all. The feast lingers late into the night, but you peel away from the great hall, drawn toward the smaller, quieter chamber where the air feels heavier with ceremony. Here, it's not about glances or whispered half-sentences. It's about formality. The kind of ritual so bound by rules that a single movement of your hand means more than an entire love letter. The courtly kiss is about to happen. Not the kind you're picturing, no impulsive lean-ins or passionate grabs. But a moment staged like theater, every detail rehearsed over generations. You stand near the doorway, careful to remain out of the line of sight, and watch as two figures approach the center of the room. He is a visiting noble, his cloak lined with fur so soft it catches the candlelight. She is the lady of the household, draped in crimson and gold, a long train trailing behind her like a river of fabric. Their eyes don't meet until the last possible moment, when every onlooker is already watching. The mainstream historical fact? In many courts, the kiss wasn't purely romantic. It was a diplomatic gesture, a symbol of loyalty or respect, sometimes even a sign of submission depending on the social rank of those involved. A knight might kiss the hand of a noblewoman as part of a formal greeting. Two nobles of equal rank might kiss on the cheek to seal an alliance. And unlike today, the where of the kiss mattered. Hand, cheek, lips, or even a shoulder, each carried its own weight of meaning. But here's a quirky tidbit for you. In some medieval courts, there were actual manuals describing the correct way to kiss in formal settings. How far to bow, how much eye contact was allowed, even how long the lips could linger without crossing into scandal. Imagine having to study a rule book before you so much as pucker up. The two figures close the gap between them. The man bows low, a smooth, practiced motion, then takes her right hand. Not the left, because the left was often considered improper. He bends over it slowly, lips barely brushing the skin, just enough to acknowledge, but not enough to presume. The crowd murmurs approval. Historians still argue whether these public displays had any real romantic undercurrent, or if they were simply political theater. Was there a flicker of genuine attraction beneath the heavy layers of etiquette? Or was every gesture purely calculated? You watch closely, trying to read the tension in their shoulders, the pace of their breathing. The lady, for her part, responds with a shallow curtsy, her eyes lifting to meet his for a fraction longer than necessary. That's all it takes, a pause that can be replayed endlessly in the mind later. In the rigid choreography of the courtly kiss, small deviations are like lightning in a clear sky. The onlookers shift, some leaning in as though this tiny break in decorum is a whisper they're desperate to hear. In a way, the real audience isn't the person you kiss. It's everyone else watching, weighing, and whispering about what it might mean. You catch sight of a scribe in the corner, dutifully recording events of the evening. That's the other layer of pressure. What happens here could be written down, immortalized in ink and parchment, read by people who will never meet either of them. The kiss is both a private exchange and a public spectacle. As they separate, the room exhales. The lady retreats toward her attendants, who instantly engage her in low conversation, likely dissecting every microsecond of the encounter. The nobleman accepts a goblet from a servant and sips, his eyes scanning the crowd, perhaps for allies, perhaps for enemies. You realize something important in this moment. In the medieval world, a kiss like this is less about lips meeting skin and more about the architecture of power. It's a handshake, a contract, a declaration, one that must be performed with absolute precision. But still, there's a warmth in the air, a sense that, under all the ceremonial weight, there might be a sliver of something human. You can almost see it in the way the lady's hand lingers at her side, as though remembering the contact. The crowd begins to disperse, the energy fading into smaller conversations. You step back into the corridor, where the stone walls carry the muffled sounds of laughter and music from the great hall. Ahead, the torchlight flickers, and you catch yourself wondering how many of these courtly kisses were remembered for their political outcome, and how many for the way they made someone's heart race. Because here's the quiet truth. In this world, you might wait weeks, months, or even years for a moment like that. And when it finally arrives, it's not the kiss itself that matters most. It's the story everyone tells about it afterwards. You leave the hush of the castle's chambers and follow the smell of smoke and frying batter toward the village below. The cobbles turn to packed earth, and the air swells with sound. Bells jingling, fiddles sawing, and the laughter of people who've been waiting all year for this. It's fair day. Lanterns swing above the green, casting amber halos on the churned-up mud. Here, kissing plays by an entirely different rulebook. Forget the veils and delicate bows of the nobles. You're in the land of cheek pecks, noisy embraces, and the kind of playful smooches that get shrugged off with a grin. You see a girl dart out from a knot of friends to plant a quick kiss on her sweetheart's cheek, then vanish back into the crowd before he can react. He stands frozen, looking like he just won a cow. The scent of cinnamon and roasting meat pulls you to a pie stall. A baker with arms dusted in flour winks at a young lad and says, "Hot pasty works better than poetry." The boy solemnly presents the pie to a freckled girl. She takes a bite, then rewards him with a kiss. Just the cheek, because this is public space. Out here, affection is part of the barter system. You give a treat, you get a peck, and no one faints in scandal. Mainstream historical fact? Medieval fairs weren't just markets, they were temporary legal zones. Merchants could sell toll-free, disputes got settled on the spot, and with so many people traveling in, they were prime matchmaking grounds. The social mix loosened formality, and greetings got tactile. At one corner, a circle of young villagers plays a forfeit game. When the song stops, the one holding the garland either does a silly task or gives a quick cheek kiss. It's all under the watch of elders who pretend not to notice but absolutely keep score. Historians still argue whether kissing games were widespread or mostly regional quirks, but here they're a highlight. You duck near the ale booth. The brewer leans in with a conspiratorial grin. Parsley in the mash keeps the breath less murderous. You think of the perfumed veils at court and laugh. Here, the medieval breath mint is just a sprig of greenery. Past the musicians, a couple leans on a goose pen. They exchange 2 quick cheek pecks before the goose honks so loudly they jump apart. The girl's mother raises an eyebrow from the next stall, and suddenly the boy is very interested in onion prices. A quirky tidbit floats from a knot of older women. At winter revels, a kissing ring or sprig of greenery lets 2 people share a chaste peck if they stand beneath it when the bell strikes. Is it ancient magic? A lucky charm? No one agrees and no one cares. It's fun, and it keeps the rules clear. You join a line dance. Left, right, clap, turn. and catch a girl brushing her partner's cheek mid-step. The crowd oohs, the music rolls on, and the moment dissolves before it can become gossip. Somewhere, a medieval choreographer just invented the mute button for awkwardness. Near a tent, a fortune teller tells a girl she'll get her first real kiss when she stops hiding her hands. It's advice equal parts wisdom and riddle. You imagine her replaying it for weeks. By the bread ovens, a toddler thanks you for passing a basket with a biscuit and a smack on your sleeve. Meant to be a kiss, mostly flour. Affection here is casual. Crumbs shared, shoulders bumped, cheeks tapped. Lips on lips? Rare in public. Brow kisses and quick pecks are the norm. Signals that say, I like you, also my aunt is watching. At the edge of the green, cousins mock argue over a kissing game. An elder bans any more after the night bell. They agree, then kiss each other's cheeks anyway, proving habit beats rules. You remember the court's carefully staged kisses and think how different this feels. If the castle turns affection into polished coins, the village spends it like copper pennies, often freely and with a wink. As the fare thins, you spot an old couple on a log, sharing a tin of ale. He says something that makes her laugh until she wheezes. She taps his cheek, then presses her lips there. Quick, sure, no audience needed. You climb back toward the castle under the cooling night. Behind you, the last cheer fades, and you carry the warmth of a place where a kiss is just part of the music. Small, bright, and enough. The bells call you back uphill, their chimes carrying through the chill night air. By the time you reach the chapel, the heavy oak doors stand open, spilling candlelight into the courtyard. You step inside, and the cool stone underfoot swallows the noise of the village fair. Here the mood shifts, measured, reverent, almost hesitant. This is the kiss of peace. In the medieval church, it's not the romantic kind at all, at least not officially. It's part of the liturgy, a symbolic gesture of unity among worshippers. Yet even in this holy space, the act of sharing breath and touch carries a charge that can be complicated. You slide into a side alcove where you can see without being seen. The congregation stands in neat rows, their faces lit by flickering votive candles. The priest, robed in gold and white, steps forward. He leans toward the deacon, and their cheeks brush in a practiced, formal way. Then the gesture is passed along, person to person, pew to pew, until it ripples through the entire nave. The mainstream historical fact? The kiss of peace, or osculum passis, was a common part of Christian worship from the early church through the Middle Ages. In some traditions, it was lip to lip between men as a sign of spiritual brotherhood. By the later medieval period, many congregations used a pax board, a small object kissed and then handed along, to avoid too much personal contact. And here's the quirky tidbit. In certain towns, the order in which people received the kiss was a matter of fierce local politics. Being offered the kiss before someone else could signal your higher status, or ignite a petty feud. Historians still argue whether churches encouraged these hierarchies intentionally, or if they just tolerated them as unavoidable human nature. You watch as the gesture moves closer to where a cluster of nobles stand. A young squire leans in toward a lady in a pale blue gown. Their cheeks touch, just enough for the scent of her rosemary-scented hair to reach him. His eyes flicker. Down, then away. In the dim light, no one else seems to notice, but you catch it. The tiny shift from ritual to personal. The pax board comes next, gleaming in the candlelight. It's passed from hand to hand, kissed in turn. When it reaches the couple from the courtyard, the same pair you've been tracking. The man's lips linger just half a heartbeat longer than polite. When the lady takes it, her fingers brush his. It's nothing, and yet it's everything. The choir begins a low chant, voices weaving through the incense-laden air. The sound swells, wrapping around the congregation like a shawl. People close their eyes in prayer, but a few steal quick looks at the ones beside them. In a place where touch is rationed, every sanctioned moment of contact is precious and possibly dangerous. you can feel the tension under the surface. This kiss isn't about passion, not here, but it is about connection. And the medieval mind didn't always separate the two neatly. Spiritual unity could be genuine, political, or even an excuse for the briefest human contact in a world that discouraged it. When the service ends, the congregation drifts toward the door. The scent of incense clings to their clothing, the echo of the chant still humming in the rafters. Outside, the night feels sharper, as though the air itself is listening. The couple exits last. Their hands don't touch, but they walk close enough for the sleeves of their garments to brush. You realize that in the medieval world, even in church, a kiss might be both a prayer and a risk. And here, under the watch of saints carved in stone, you've just seen how faith and longing can share the same breath. You leave the chapel's stone embrace and follow the narrow garden path that snakes behind the outer wall. The air smells of damp earth and night-blooming flowers, their pale petals almost glowing under the moonlight. Out here, beyond the prying eyes of the great hall or the stern gaze of saints in stained glass, the atmosphere changes. It's quieter, softer, and every shadow feels like a curtain that could hide something worth discovering. You round a corner and there they are, the couple you've been trailing since the courtyard, half hidden beneath an arch of ivy. She's leaning against the low wall, her veil loose around her shoulders. He stands close enough that his breath must be brushing her cheek. They don't speak. Instead, they hover in that electric space between contact and retreat, each waiting for the other to take the risk. In the medieval world, this is dangerous territory. The garden at night is a stage for trysts, but it's also a trap. Servants gossip, guards patrol, and one ill-timed cough from behind a hedge could end a romance before it begins. The mainstream historical fact? Gardens were among the most popular meeting places for secret lovers in medieval Europe, especially those attached to monasteries, castles, or noble estates. They were designed not only for beauty, but for privacy. Winding paths, secluded alcoves, and walls high enough to shield from casual view. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some medieval courtly traditions, a tryst in a garden was considered so archetypal that poets used the enclosed garden as a metaphor for a woman's virtue. Ironically, those same gardens were also the most common spots for virtue to be tested. Historians still argue whether these poetic associations were meant to warn young women or to give them a coded script to follow. The man takes a step closer. You hear the faint rustle of fabric, the almost inaudible catch of her breath. She tilts her head just slightly, not quite enough to be obvious, but enough to signal she won't pull away. In that gesture, centuries of etiquette crumble for a heartbeat. Then a sound, the clink of a distant key in a lock, reminds them where they are. They break apart, but only just. He leans in, murmuring something you can't quite catch, and she smiles. The kind of smile that would be invisible in a crowded hall, but glows in the moonlight here. They start walking, slow enough that you can follow. Along the path, they pause to admire a rose bush, their hands brushing as they both reach for the same bloom. It's a clumsy excuse, but no one's watching except you. They aren't the only ones here. Farther down the path, another pair sits on a stone bench. They're not even pretending to discuss horticulture. The man holds the woman's hand in both of his, speaking in a low, urgent voice. You can't hear the words, but you don't need to. The way she looks at him says she's already decided something important. Somewhere above, a nightbird calls. The sound breaks the moment, and the bench couple rises, vanishing into the hedges. The couple you've been following lingers. The man glances toward the garden gate, weighing the risk, and then, finally, steps into her space. It's not a kiss, not yet. His forehead rests against hers, a touch so small it would escape notice in daylight. But here, in the secrecy of the garden, it's a promise. They both know it may be weeks before they can risk this again. In the medieval garden, love is a kind of negotiation, a balancing act between desire and survival. One wrong move and the same walls that sheltered you could become your prison. But for now, under the quiet blessing of the moon, they've stolen a moment no one else can take from them. You turn back toward the castle, the smell of crushed mint and wet stone trailing after you. Somewhere behind, the couple finally closes that last inch of distance. You don't need to see it to know. It's the kind of kiss that blooms only in places where it's not supposed to happen. By morning, the castle is humming with a different kind of excitement. Banners ripple from the turrets, their colors flashing against the pale sky. The sound of hooves clattering over the drawbridge rings in your ears as knights from nearby lands arrive, each with a retinue in tow. It's tournament day, an event where chivalry is paraded for all to see, and where a kiss can be as much a performance as the joust itself. You weave through the crowd gathering near the tilt yard. The air smells of trampled grass, horse sweat, and roasting meat from the vendors lining the fence. Women in bright gowns lean over the rail, their hands fluttering like ribbons as they wave to knights they know, or wish they did. The social theater here is just as important as the combat. The mainstream historical fact? In many medieval tournaments, knights would dedicate their performance to a particular lady, often receiving a token from her. A ribbon, a glove, or even a favor in the form of a kiss on the cheek, or hand. This wasn't just romance, it was brand management. A knight's public association with a noblewoman could boost his status, attract alliances, and sometimes even secure patronage. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some knights were known to wear a lady's favor in absurdly visible ways, tied to a lance, pinned to their helm, or in one infamous case, sewn onto the outside of their armor in a place no one could miss. Historians still argue whether this was gallantry or just showmanship for the gossip mill. You spot the couple you've been tracking all along. She's seated in the stands among the nobility, her gown a deep green that makes her look like she's stepped straight out of a tapestry. He's among the armored figures in the line of competitors, visor up for now, scanning the stands. When his eyes find hers, the rest of the world seems to blur. A herald calls his name, and he steps forward. Before he mounts his horse, he approaches the railing where she sits. The crowd quiets in anticipation. This is the moment. She leans forward, her hand extended. He bows low, removing his gauntlet, and takes her fingers in his. For a breath, they hover there, the distance between his lips and her skin charged enough to make the nearby matrons murmur. Then he kisses her knuckles, lightly but with a deliberate slowness that makes the crowd erupt in approving cheers. It's not just a romantic gesture. Everyone watching now knows exactly whose favor he rides for. It's a declaration that will ripple through the stands, whispered from one set of lips to another. The joust begins. You watch as knights thunder down the field, lances splintering, horses kicking up dirt. Each time he rides, his gaze flickers back to her, as though she's the only one worth winning for. Between rounds, he raises his lance toward her, and she responds by lifting a ribbon, his ribbon, high in the air. Not all kisses here are romantic. At one point, a knight defeats his opponent and, in a burst of sportsmanship, plants a quick kiss on the man's cheek. The crowd roars with laughter and applause. Even in a world of rigid etiquette, the tournament is a place where gestures can bend into spectacle. You hear a vendor behind you quip, "He kisses better than he jousts," earning a round of chuckles. A young page whispers to another that he hopes to win a lady's favor someday, though he's not sure he'd survive the armor. By the final match, the tension is thick. Your knight, her knight, faces a rival in black and gold. The clash is fierce, each pass rattling the stands. When he finally unseats his opponent, the crowd surges to its feet. He dismounts, still breathing hard, and makes his way back to the railing. This time, there's no hesitation. She leans forward and he kisses her cheek. Swift, almost chaste, but loaded with the weight of victory. The crowd's cheer feels like a wave breaking over the field. As the sun dips lower, banners droop in the evening breeze and the stands begin to empty. You catch one last glimpse of them, her hand on his arm as they walk toward the castle gates, their heads tilted close in conversation. In the medieval tournament, a kiss could be a promise, a brand, a public claim. And today, you've seen all three woven together in a single, dusty, glorious spectacle. The castle feels quieter after the tournament, but the kitchens are anything but. You follow the warm scent of herbs and honey down a narrow stairwell into a low-ceilinged room where apprentices clatter copper pots and the air hums with simmering stews. It's here, away from the tilt-yard dust and public eyes, that another kind of preparation begins. Not for jousts or dances, but for the kiss itself. A woman in a linen cap glances at you as she grinds something in a mortar. "For the breath," she says, pushing the pestle down with deliberate force. Inside is a paste of mint, sage, and fennel seeds, bound together with a dab of honey. You'd be surprised how many brave knights forget to think about that. She gives you a knowing smile. The mainstream historical fact? Medieval apothecaries and kitchens often stocked herbs specifically for breath freshening. Mint, parsley, cloves, and even anise seeds were chewed or brewed before social occasions. The connection between scent and attraction wasn't lost on them. Sweet breath was considered not only pleasant, but a sign of good health and refinement. The quirky tidbit? Love potions were a thing, though more often they were herbal tonics designed to warm the blood or cheer the heart than anything truly magical. Recipes might include cinnamon for heat, ginger for vitality, or a dash of exotic spices like nutmeg, which had to travel halfway around the world before ending up in your cup. Historians still argue whether people truly believed these brews worked, or whether they were simply a socially acceptable excuse to drink something expensive and intoxicating before a meeting. At one table, a young man nervously tests his breath against the back of his hand, earning a laugh from the kitchen maid. She hands him a sprig of parsley and says, "Chew that before you make a fool of yourself." He obeys, grimacing at the bitterness but not daring to spit it out. Across the room, another apprentice is rolling small pellets of spiced paste and powdered sugar. These will be wrapped in cloth and slipped into a noblewoman's pouch, ready to be discreetly used before a gathering. They're as much a fashion accessory as a functional tool. You spot the couple you've been following. They arrive separately, of course. She through the servant's stairwell, he under the pretext of delivering a note from the steward. But their timing is close enough to be suspicious. She accepts a small packet from the apothecary, tucking it into her sleeve. He lingers near the shelves of dried herbs, running his fingers over bundles of rosemary and thyme, as though memorizing the scents. When their eyes meet across the room, there's a flicker of something conspiratorial. He pretends to study a jar of preserved quince. She pretends not to notice him, but her hand dips into her sleeve, and when she lifts her fingers to her lips, the faintest scent of clove drifts in the air. One of the older cooks winks at you. They think no one sees, but we've seen this dance before. She stirs a pot of mulled wine, the steam curling like a lazy cat in the air. Some take a potion to stir courage. Others just want to know their kiss won't taste like onion soup. A page runs in, calling for a tray to be sent up to the solar. The noise breaks the moment, and the couple drift apart, each leaving by a different door. But the air they leave behind feels different now. Thicker with spice, sharper with possibility. As you climb back toward the upper floors, you realize something. In this world, preparation for a kiss is almost as important as the kiss itself. It's part of the ritual, a way to turn anticipation into action. Whether it's a ribbon tied on a lance or a sprig of mint hidden in a sleeve, every detail is a silent declaration. I am ready for when the moment comes. And somewhere in the castle tonight, two people are carrying that readiness with them, tucked away like a secret ingredient waiting to be shared. By the next morning, you're on the road, figuratively at least. In your mind, you're following the kissing customs as they shift across borders and languages. Because here in medieval Europe, a kiss is anything but universal. The same gesture that earns smiles in one town could spark outrage in the next. You begin in the north, where the air smells of pine resin and the wind bites your cheeks. Here, in certain Scandinavian courts, the kiss is often reserved for kin and formal alliances. A man might greet a friend with a brisk cheek press in public, but any romantic kissing is hidden behind doors thick enough to keep in the heat. The mainstream historical fact? In colder climates, physical greetings sometimes emphasized warmth and familiarity, cheek-to-cheek contact, hand clasps, and embraces. But lips meeting lips was rare in public, partly due to climate and partly due to social reserve. Travel south in your imagination, and the air warms, heavy with rosemary and citrus. In parts of Italy and southern France, cheek kisses are more common, even between acquaintances, though the number of kisses, 1, 2, or 3, varies by region, and woe to the traveler who gets it. Wrong! Here's the quirky tidbit. In some areas, alternating cheeks was considered polite, but starting on the wrong cheek could be interpreted as mocking the person or signaling disdain. Historians still argue whether these unwritten rules were meant to guard intimacy or just to keep outsiders guessing. In the East, you pass through bustling markets where Byzantine influence lingers. Here, a kiss on the hand to someone of higher status is as much about hierarchy as affection. Sometimes the recipient doesn't even return the gesture, turning it into a one-way transaction of respect. In these cultures, the meaning of a kiss can shift dramatically depending on the direction, who initiates, who receives, and whether the gesture is reciprocated. You imagine riding into a small Germanic town where, during the midwinter festivals, young people might exchange a quick kiss under hanging greenery, much like the kissing bow traditions of later centuries. But in everyday life, that same gesture might be considered brazen. The medieval mind liked rules even for things as fleeting as a brush of lips. You spot the couple you've been trailing, not in reality, but in this mental journey, transplanted into each setting. In the Italian square, they could greet openly, a quick double kiss, and no one would blink. In the Nordic hall, they'd barely dare to touch hands in public. And in the Byzantine court, they'd have to disguise their affection as a gesture of formal deference. One afternoon, you find yourself in a bustling port city where traders from all corners mingle. It's chaos. Merchants from Spain, cheek-kissing their friends from France, English sailors bowing awkwardly instead, and a Venetian diplomat who insists on kissing everyone's cheeks and hands just to cover all bases. Watching them, you realize that even in a world obsessed with rules, those rules bend in the borderlands. Here, a kiss is less about tradition and more about navigating the maze of who you're speaking to. A street performer jokes in the marketplace. 3 kisses in Naples, 2 in Arles, none in London unless you're drunk. The crowd laughs because it's true. The differences are so ingrained that travelers often keep to their own habits, which can cause misunderstandings. Sometimes amusing, sometimes less so. By evening, you've returned, at least in thought, to the castle where your couple waits. Their world is built on the customs of their region, one where public affection is rare, where even a cheek kiss outside of ceremony can stir whispers. But knowing what you know now, you can see how fragile those boundaries are. All it would take is a journey, a feast with foreign guests, or a diplomatic visit, and suddenly a simple kiss could carry a dozen meanings at once. And in the medieval world, meanings are currency. A kiss might be welcome, shocking, respectful, insulting, or binding, all depending on where you stand when you give it. The lips are the same everywhere. It's the rules around them that change like the wind. The first hints of autumn settle over the castle like a shawl. The air grows sharper, the evenings arrive sooner, and with them comes a quieter, more cautious rhythm. The streets below are not as crowded now, not because of the cold, but because whispers of illness are moving faster than the carts that carry grain. It begins as murmurs, someone's cousin falling ill after a trip to the next town, a merchant's wife struck down in a matter of days. Soon the whispers have names: plague, pestilence, the Black Death. You can feel it in the way people move, giving each other more space, lingering less in conversation, avoiding unnecessary touch. In a world where the kiss was once a thread in the fabric of daily life, fear starts to unpick those stitches. The kiss of peace in church is replaced almost entirely by the pax board or by a polite bow. Courtyard strolls grow more formal. Gardens go empty at dusk. And even in the market, greetings shift from a cheek touch to a nod from a safe distance. The mainstream historical fact? During plague years in medieval Europe, especially the Black Death of the 14th century, social customs surrounding physical contact changed dramatically. Chroniclers wrote about people abandoning long-held gestures of affection and respect, not only out of fear, but because public health orders, in whatever rudimentary form they existed, encouraged it. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some towns, couples exchanged air kisses long before that term existed, standing close enough to share words, but letting the lips hover just shy of skin. Historians still argue whether this was purely caution, or whether it became its own form of flirtation in dangerous times. You see your couple again, but the distance between them now is more than just social. He stands in the courtyard, gloves still on, hands clasped behind his back. She watches from the balcony above, her veil drawn across her face. Not for modesty, but protection. Their eyes meet, but they don't move closer. When he finally approaches, he stops short of the stairs. He removes one glove and bows, touching his fingers lightly to his lips before raising them toward her. She mirrors the motion, the gesture turning into a silent, mutual kiss that never quite happens. And yet, in its restraint, it feels heavier than any embrace they've shared. The marketplace echoes this new choreography. A baker hands over bread with arms fully extended, and instead of a kiss on the cheek for an old friend, she offers a smile through the thin linen of her face covering. Children still run and laugh, but they keep to their family clusters. The absence of casual touch is like a missing note in a familiar song. You don't realize how much it shaped the melody until it's gone. The fear is real. A kiss could be the thread that carries sickness from one person to another, turning an act of warmth into a possible sentence of death. And yet, the human desire for connection refuses to vanish completely. Lovers meet in gardens but speak from opposite ends of a bench. Friends greet each other with bows so deep they almost touch the ground. Parents blow kisses to their children across the courtyard. You overhear a physician explaining to a merchant that ill vapors travel on the breath, and the merchant mutters, "Then I'll keep my breath to myself." But you catch the same man later that night, pressing his forehead to his wife's in the flickering lamplight. Even fear can't entirely overwrite habit. For your couple, the lack of contact sharpens every other sense. A glance becomes an embrace. The sound of footsteps on the stair feels like a hand at the small of the back. The scent of rosemary oil on her veil lingers in his mind longer than any touch could. When the first frost comes, it brings no end to the sickness, but it does bring a strange kind of acceptance. People begin to understand that their customs will change for a while, and that the kisses they cannot give will have to live in memory until it's safe again. And in the medieval world, memories can be stubborn things, carrying warmth through the coldest seasons, holding space for the day when lips might meet without fear once more. The sickness loosens its grip by spring, and the castle hums with the anticipation of a wedding. Word travels fast. The daughter of a powerful noble family will be wed to an allied lord, sealing a pact that could hold the region's peace for years. You drift into the great hall as it's transformed. Garlands of ivy and early roses drape from the beams, the air scented with beeswax candles and the faint sweetness of honeyed wine. Musicians tune their instruments in the corner, plucking and bowing as servants scurry past with armfuls of linen and silver. The mainstream historical fact? In the medieval world, the wedding day kiss was not just a romantic gesture, it was a legal seal. The kiss before witnesses could be as binding as any signed document, confirming the union in both the eyes of the church and the law. Often it happened immediately after the priest pronounced the couple husband and wife, making it less a spontaneous moment and more a required clause in the marriage contract. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some places, the kiss wasn't just between bride and groom. After the ceremony, it was common for the groom to kiss the female guests and the bride to kiss the male guests, a symbolic sharing of joy and goodwill. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine tradition or an excuse for guests to get a bit of fun out of the day. You watch as the ceremony begins. The priest's voice carries through the vaulted space, echoing off the stone. The couple stands side by side, hands joined, their fingers intertwined tightly enough that their knuckles pale. This is not just the merging of two people, it's the joining of lands, incomes, and armed forces. The air thickens as the vows conclude. The priest gives the final blessing, and the hall holds its breath. The groom turns to the bride, lifting her veil in a gesture so practiced it feels ceremonial in itself. For a heartbeat, they pause, an unspoken acknowledgement that every eye in the room is on them. Then he leans in and kisses her, lips just brushing hers, long enough to satisfy the formality, but not so long as to scandalize the older matrons in the front row. It's not passion, it's punctuation. A moment to mark the transition from separate to united. The applause that follows is polite, measured, but it swells into cheers when the couple turns to face their guests. The reception blurs into a whirl of color and sound. Tables groan under roasted meats, sugared almonds, and towering loaves of bread. Goblets of wine clink in endless toasts. Laughter fills the hall, and the musicians launch into a faster tune. Somewhere near the center of the room, the bride shares a quick kiss on the cheek with her father, then with a cluster of aunts. The groom makes his way down the opposite side, clasping shoulders and, yes, kissing the cheeks of his new in-laws. And there, just on the edge of the celebration, you spot the couple you've been following. They aren't the bride and groom, but the wedding gives them cover. In the press of people offering congratulations, they exchange a kiss on the cheek, lingering just long enough for their hands to brush. To anyone else, it's part of the festive chaos. To them, it's a moment hidden in plain sight. The night stretches on and the music grows louder. Guests begin the traditional circle dances, pulling strangers into the line and spinning until everyone is breathless. Somewhere between the steps and the laughter, another tradition slips in, a playful steal-a-kiss game, where a guest caught in the center must kiss someone chosen by the crowd. It's all in good humor, but the cheers are loudest when the chosen pair are shy about it. By the time the last candle gutters, the couple is gone, spirited away to the bridal chamber. Their wedding day kiss will be remembered by the witnesses as proper and solemn. But you know that elsewhere in the hall tonight, smaller kisses were exchanged that will be remembered for entirely different reasons. By the next week, the wedding garlands are gone, but the air in the great hall is still thick with formality. Today, it's not music or feasting that draws the crowd, it's politics. Delegations from 2 neighboring realms have arrived, their banners lined up like rival chess pieces. The long oak table in the center is stacked with scrolls, wax seals, and pitchers of watered wine. You slip into a shadowed alcove just as the first round of greetings begins. The herald calls out names, voices bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. Lords bow to each other with deliberate slowness as though their spines are measuring out the depth of respect. Ladies curtsy, their skirts whispering against the flagstones. The mainstream historical fact? In medieval diplomacy, kisses could be as binding as signatures on a treaty. A kiss between monarchs or their official representatives wasn't simply polite. It was a symbolic seal, meant to affirm trust and friendship. In some traditions, failing to return such a kiss could be read as an insult, even a challenge. Here's the quirky tidbit. Not all diplomatic kisses were equal. A kiss on the cheek might signal alliance, while a kiss on the lips could imply deep mutual loyalty, or, depending on context, an unsettling amount of dominance. Historians still argue whether rulers used the more intimate gestures sincerely or as calculated power plays. The first notable exchange comes when the visiting duke approaches your host's throne dais. The duke bows, then leans forward, placing a kiss on each cheek of the ruling lord. The room exhales, relieved. This is a public affirmation that the meeting will start in peace. Moments later, a different envoy steps forward and kisses only one cheek. The shift is subtle, but the watching courtiers exchange quick, meaningful glances. Then comes the heart of the spectacle. The visiting queen, regal in deep blue velvet, approaches the host lord. She offers her hand. He bows, but instead of kissing her fingers, he steps closer and touches his lips lightly to her cheek. The gesture is warm, even a little daring, and the crowd murmurs, either in approval or in whispered gossip about what it might mean. And then you see them, your couple. She's seated far back in the nobles section, poised like any other lady in waiting. He's part of the Lord's personal guard today, standing near the edge of the dais. In the swirl of formal kisses and ritual gestures, they're miles apart in rank and role. But then, the visiting queen turns to greet the household ladies. One by one, she offers her hand, and each lady kisses her cheek in return. When she reaches your lady, the contact is brief, just a formal touch. But as your lady steps back, she casts the faintest glance toward the guard, and here's where the theater of diplomacy works in their favor. Surrounded by ceremonial kisses, no one notices the smallest lift at the corner of her lips. The negotiations drag on. Parchment is unrolled, terms are read aloud in a slow drone. Every so often, agreements are punctuated with yet another formal kiss, this time between envoys, sealing each clause like a wax seal pressed to parchment. By the time the final toast is raised, the tension in the hall has shifted. The visiting delegation departs with smiles, treaties in hand, and the courtiers gossip in low, rapid tones. Some speculate that today's exchange of kisses marks the start of lasting peace. Others predict it will all unravel within a season. Historians, centuries later, will debate the same question. But you, sitting in your shadowed alcove, know something no chronicler will record. That in the midst of royal theater and diplomatic ritual, a guard and a lady found their own quiet role in the day's drama. Because in the medieval world, politics and affection often share the same stage, and sometimes the same kiss. The rain has been falling all morning, soaking the courtyard and turning the packed earth into a slick, treacherous mess. Inside the castle, though, the air is hot with something other than weather. Whispers running ahead of you like mice in the dark. By the time you step into the great hall, you know the rumor. Someone kissed the wrong person. Not wrong in the sense of bad breath or clumsy timing. Wrong in the way that topples reputations and rearranges alliances. At the far end of the hall, a makeshift dais has been set for a hearing. The accused stands there, head bowed, flanked by two guards. The accuser sits rigid in a carved oak chair, lips pressed into a thin line. The mainstream historical fact? In the medieval world, a kiss could serve as evidence in both secular and ecclesiastical courts. If the gesture breached betrothal agreements, implied adultery, or violated class boundaries, it might be treated not as romance, but as a public offense. Even uninvited or misinterpreted kisses could be used as proof in cases of misconduct. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some court records describe disputes over whether a kiss was too long or overly familiar to be innocent. Historians still argue whether these were genuine moral concerns or just convenient tools for political maneuvering. You edge closer, slipping between a pair of gossiping merchants. From their whispers, the story sharpens. At last week's feast, during the post-tourney celebration, a knight supposedly kissed the betrothed daughter of a visiting baron. Not on the cheek, but on the lips in full view of her father. The knight claims it was a congratulatory gesture, nothing more. The baron calls it an insult to his honor, maybe even an attempt to undermine the alliance. The hall is divided. Some say the kiss was nothing, others insist it was deliberate provocation. The accused, tall, armored, even in the hearing, keeps his voice low, answering the steward's questions without looking at the baron. The lady in question sits beside her father, face unreadable. Hands folded so tightly her knuckles show white. You scan the crowd and find your couple. She's on the far side, among the ladies in waiting. He's pressed into the throng of onlookers, helmet tucked under one arm. For once, their eyes don't meet. All attention is on the drama at the dais. The steward calls for witnesses. A servant claims she saw the lady smile before the kiss, which sparks a ripple of murmurs. A visiting scribe says the moment was so brief it could hardly be called scandalous, and yet the Baron's voice cuts through like a blade. It was public. It was deliberate, and it was mine to allow or forbid. The judgment hangs in the air. No one expects a whipping or exile. That would be too severe for a kiss. But fines, demotion, or forced apologies are all possible. The steward confers with the lord of the castle, and after a long silence, the verdict comes. The knight will issue a public apology and offer the Baron a symbolic token of contrition, likely gold or a gift of arms. The tension breaks, but the whispers grow louder. Everyone knows the accusation will linger longer than the punishment. In this world, a kiss can leave a bruise on reputation that no balm can heal. As the crowd disperses, you catch a brief moment in the shuffle, your couple moving closer in the current of people. For half a breath, their shoulders brush, and her fingers graze his gauntleted hand. No one sees but you. In the shadow of scandal, they've stolen their own small contact, subtle enough to vanish into the noise. Because here in the medieval court, a kiss is never just a kiss. It's evidence, it's weaponry. It's the start or end of something far bigger than the moment itself. And for those who want to survive, knowing when not to kiss can be just as important as knowing when to dare it. Night has fallen, and the castle's great fire burns low. You find yourself drawn to the smaller hall beside the library where a handful of people have gathered. Not for politics or ceremony, but for stories. A bard sits near the hearth, his lute resting on one knee, his voice weaving tales as effortlessly as the smoke curls toward the rafters. The story tonight is about a kiss. Not a real one, not exactly, but one wrapped in legend and tangled in magic. You settle into a bench, letting the warmth and rhythm of his words pull you in. The mainstream historical fact? Medieval literature, especially in the chivalric and troubadour traditions, was full of kisses that carried symbolic weight. Kisses that broke enchantments, cursed the unfaithful, or pledged undying loyalty. These were rarely just decorative details, they often turned the gears of the plot. The bard begins with a tale of a knight who must win back his beloved, trapped in an enchanted sleep. Only a kiss, given freely and without fear, can wake her. But here's the quirky tidbit. In some versions of the story, it's not the knight's kiss that works. It's the kiss of a loyal friend or even a rival. Historians still argue whether this twist was meant to teach humility or simply to surprise the listener. He moves on to a darker tale, the cursed kiss of a fairy queen. Anyone who accepts it is doomed to wander the forest, searching for her until they waste away. The room leans in, the firelight flickering across faces as the bard describes the queen's lips, cool as moonlit marble, and the hopeless devotion they inspire. You notice your couple sitting at opposite ends of the room, each pretending to listen like any other guest. But when the bard speaks of lovers separated by vows and duty, their gazes almost, but not quite, meet across the space. The next story is gentler. Two peasants who fall in love but are forbidden to wed. They agree to meet once a year, at midsummer, in the meadow where they first kissed. Decades pass, and though their hair turns white and their steps grow slow, they keep the vow until the day they meet for the last time, exchanging one final kiss as the sun sets behind them. The bard pauses for a sip of ale, then closes with a strange tale from the east. A traveling merchant who wins the favor of a mysterious woman after refusing her kiss. She tells him later that, had he accepted, he would have been bound to her service for 7 years. Sometimes, the bard says with a wink, the kiss you don't take is the one that saves you. When the last chord fades, the audience stirs, stretching limbs stiff from stillness. People murmur about which story they liked best, and the group begins to drift away. Your couple leaves with them, swallowed by the flow of bodies. But you can't help imagining which of those tales they carried with them. The one about the enchanted sleep, the cursed devotion, the lifelong vow, or the dangerous refusal. Because in the medieval mind, kisses in stories aren't fluff. They're symbols, warnings, hopes, and tests. Mirrors of the real ones stolen in courtyards, traded at tournaments, or withheld out of necessity. And like all good stories, they leave just enough room for the listener to wonder what they might do if they found themselves in the tale. Dawn comes early at the edge of a walled city. You're there before the sun admits it, standing where the cobbled street narrows into the shadow of the gatehouse. Dew beads on the iron studs of the doors, tiny stars that will vanish as soon as the day warms. A sleepy guard leans on his pike, yawning so wide you worry he'll swallow the sparrow that keeps scolding him from the lintel. The bell up in the tower has just finished the slow peal that means opening, and with it the city exhales. Carts creak, boots scuff, and somewhere a baker bangs a peal against his oven like a cymbal. You feel it in your chest. This is the place where the story runs thin, stretched like gold leaf until light bleeds through it. People don't come to the gates to linger, they come to pass. Yet here, at the hinge between inside and outside, kisses take on a peculiar gravity. Half greeting, half goodbye, all threshold. The couple you followed across banquet halls and gardens and plague-silent courtyards waits in the lee of the wall. She wears traveling colors today. The green that once flashed like tournament silk has been traded for a sober mantle the color of wet slate. He stands bareheaded, hair still damp from a too early wash, the kind that leaves warmth steaming off the skin in the cold. Their hands are almost touching. The distance between fingers a last pocket of night that morning hasn't claimed. A mainstream historical fact to steady your feet. In many medieval towns, the gates were locked at night and opened at first light, watched by a salaried guard and sometimes a clerk who recorded departures and arrivals. Curfew and dawn bells structured daily movement. If you weren't through in time, you stayed put, no matter how urgent your errand. Journeys began here. Pilgrimages got their first blister here, and lovers measured the last inches of courage here. He clears his throat the way people do when words jam at the back. The road will be safe enough by noon, he says, and it's both instruction and plea. She nods, lifting her chin to the pale strip of sky that promises a decent day. The veil you've smelled of rosemary and incense and kitchen clove a dozen times is pinned back. The face beneath it looks exactly like someone who slept badly and pretended otherwise. I brought you something, he says, producing a small twist of linen. Inside is nothing fancy. Fennel seeds, mint, and 2 candied cloves. The little pellets of courage you first saw in the kitchens. The look they exchange is almost a smile, a callback in the language only the two of them speak. You can practically hear the kitchen maid's voice from weeks ago. Chew that before you make a fool of yourself. You've both come far since parsley and the mash days. A cart rattles by, the driver doffing his cap. Kiss her proper, or you'll regret it till Michaelmas, he calls, which is the sort of public advice that makes a private moment instantly harder. Light joke number 1. Unsolicited medieval relationship coaching because the internet hasn't been invented yet, so the street handles it. The guard snorts, and the sparrow scolds again as if to say, "Get on with it, humans." They step nearer to the postern arch, where the stone is warm from years of fingertips and prayers. There's no crowd, no bannered audience, no lute plinking the correct chord. Just the hush of a gatehouse at daybreak and the smell of wakeful dough drifting in from the bakeries. She lifts her hand, and he cups it. You remember the choreographed hand kiss in the solar? How it was all theater, every angle rehearsed. This isn't that. The kiss he gives the back of her hand now is unpracticed and unmistakable. Grateful, terrified, and tender. Quirky tidbit to tuck behind your ear. Some travelers departing a town kissed a token pressed against the city. Touching lips to a saint, carved beside the gate, or to a badge pinned over the heart. So the farewell was shared between person and place. A few even pecked the wooden gate itself, quickly because splinters, before stepping out. A superstitious insurance against ill luck. Historians still argue whether such habits were common custom or the kind of colorful behavior chroniclers noticed, precisely because it was rare. He glances up at the matin's pink sky. "If I ride to meet you at the bridge by Martin's Field..." "You'll be seen," she finishes, and they both wince. They've learned that lesson. The hearing in the hall made the cost of the wrong kiss very clear. The city walls don't just keep people out, they keep stories in. A small procession approaches, a pilgrim with a staff and scallop badge, a widow with a basket of cheeses, two apprentices balancing a chest between them like it contains a sleeping cat. The pilgrim pauses at the arch, murmurs a blessing, and the apprentices exchange a very brisk cheek tap that would be a joke if it weren't also insurance. You remember the kiss of peace, how ritual contact held equal parts piety and politics, and you realize these gatehouse gestures are cousins to that. Brief, sanctioned, and half made for the watching of others. But your pair isn't performing for anyone now. They're saving something for the last possible second. You can sense the weight of all their earlier almost. It's perfumed veils and garden hedges, tournament ribbons and plague distance pantomimes, collecting here like dew. And you see it in her eyes, the knowledge that a kiss at a gate is a promise with a direction. It doesn't only bless the past, it points the lips like a compass rose and then lets go. "Say it," she whispers. "I'll follow," he says. And it's not dramatic, not courtly, just true. He doesn't mean today. He means he will do the work of staying, keeping the rumors cool, waiting for a letter ferried by a boy who runs faster than worry does. Light joke number 2, medieval postal service. One kid, good calves, and a prayer against dogs. He leans in, and there's the barest pause, the polite ghost of ceremony, before the real thing arrives. Their kiss is gentle and quiet, the kind that knows exactly how much work a day can require of a body, and refuses to add bruise to it. No grabbing, no spectacle. He holds her cheek as if it were a page he doesn't want the wind to turn. She answers by breathing out just once into his mouth, and you think of the plague years, of kisses that had to be imagined not to endanger. Safe now, but mindful. Breath given back like a borrowed thing returned. Somewhere in the gate tower, the clerk coughs theatrically. Time is money. Ink dries fast, and the world does enjoy a schedule. Light joke number 3. Somewhere a medieval project manager is whispering, "We're burning daylight." The moment thins. She steps back and he tucks the linen twist into her palm, closing her fingers over it. "Take the south road at the mill," he says. "The clay ruts are kinder." "Keep the rosemary by your pillow," she says. "Pretend I'm breathing." A small gesture remains. She reaches for her sleeve and draws out a narrow ribbon. Green. The deep of it like moss in a well. You've seen favors lifted in a blare of sunlight and dust. Today the token is folded into an ordinary knot around his wrist. No trumpet calls, only the scratch of linen on skin. "Don't let the washerwomen take it," she warns, and it's almost a smile. As she turns toward the road, she pauses under the arch and presses her lips to 2 places. The scalloped edge of the saint, carved into the jamb, and the flat of the stone itself, cool as a forehead's rest. It's quick. It's not for theatrics. It's a way to leave some part of her here, where he can find it with his hand on his way out or in. She goes. Not dramatically, not with a run. Just the steady walk of someone who knows roads are made of steps, and you only ever get to take them one after another. He doesn't follow exactly as promised. He stands where the shade gives way to light and watches until the gray mantle becomes one more stitch in the road's long seam. Then he lifts his fingers to his lips and to the stone where she kissed it. A shabby little relay that fools no one and comforts everyone. You linger with him long enough to hear the city wake fully. The baker's cymbal clang becomes a laugh. The guard's yawn becomes a song. The sparrow decides forgiveness is possible. The gate's hinges murmur as latecomers squeeze through, complaining about socks and saints and taxes. Historians still argue whether leave-taking kisses at gates were expected ritual or private invention, but you've learned the trick of such debates. Whatever the parchment says, the heart writes its own footnotes. He finally turns back inside, ribbon bright at his wrist, breath calmer than you thought it would be. You follow, and at your shoulder the gate keeps up its low conversation with the road. Wood to stone, hinge to wind, day to day. You remember the parsley at the fair, the apothecary's clove, the awkward air kiss across the plague bench, the tournament cheek tap, the holy packs passed hand to hand. All of it has been practiced for this ordinary, unspectacular bravery. To kiss carefully, to part gently, to hold memory without letting it cut. And you, still in second person, always you, carry the sound of that soft gatehouse kiss like a coal's glow inside your chest, something to warm cold mornings and to light the little hearth of your own breathing when the room is dark. No trumpets, no scribe, just the knowledge that some kisses don't end. They just keep walking with you at the pace of your next step. Let the gate grow quiet now. Imagine the first true warmth of sunlight sliding down the stones. A slow, honeyed ribbon that reaches your shoulder, then your wrist. Then the open palm you didn't realize you were still holding out. The carts roll on, but their rumble drifts like distant surf, and the guards' voices recede until they're no more than the hush of a tide turning. Breathe in as if the air itself were a soft blanket, threaded with rosemary and clean linen, with the last faint echo of clove and beeswax. Breathe out as if you were blowing dust from a page you have finished reading, satisfied, unhurried, ready to close the cover and set it gently aside. Each breath is slower than the one before, longer, kinder, easy. Picture the couple now as two small figures on the map, one within the walls, ribbon at the wrist, one moving along the road, steady as a heartbeat. They diminish toward the horizon until they become part of the landscape, like a lane hedged with wild thyme, like a brook scribbling silver between stones. Nothing urgent follows them. There is only a patient day unrolling and a promised evening drawing soft curtains at the edges. If any stray thoughts tug at your sleeve, the clang of bells, the murmur of crowds, let them drift to the city's edge and slip out the gate, where the wind catches them and carries them into the bright, empty fields. What remains is the comfortable weight of your own body, the gentle rhythm of your breath, and the easy quiet that comes when a story knows how to end. You are warm. You are safe. The room is dim, the fan a low lullaby. Let your eyelids grow heavy the way doors grow still at night. The road can wait. The morning can wait. For now, just rest.